As we move on, before we get to Raw, let's have a little
Yes.
break in the action. Let me grab this back here. I have a book in my hand.
Well, don't threaten me.
The book.
Son of a bitch. I've got a shoe over here and I'm in reach of a bottle.
The book, the 2002 publication, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, with Michael Jan Friedman. Well, it's written Hollywood Hulk Hogan by Hollywood Hulk Hogan with Jan Michael Friedman. But I have the chapter here dealing with Memphis, and I wanted to read it to you, get your interpretation of it.
Okay, this ought to be interesting.
He talks about Pensacola. I did like this part here. I just walked into the first dressing room I saw, and it turned out to be the bad guy's dressing room. This guy, David Schultz, who wrestled as Dr. D, saw me in there and yelled, "Who the hell are you? What are you doing here? Kayfabe, get the mark the fuck out of here!" So before we go forward, Jim, if a wrestler yells, "Kayfabe, get the mark out of here," is that breaking kayfabe?
Well, first of all, like many of the Hogan stories, there is some grain of truth in this, much like there's a grain of sand on the beach. Obviously, if Hogan had made it that far, and we know that Hogan trained first in Florida and worked under a mask. What was the name that when he first got in the ring in Florida? Super Destroyer, but not like the famous ones, but just he was underneath. And then, the two territories he worked at first were the Memphis territory and the Mobile or Pensacola territory for the Fullers. And at that point, he was smart enough to the business to know that the babyface shouldn't go in the heel locker room. But he also, since probably what happened is that he got to this building, he didn't know where the fuck he was. He'd never been in goddamn Alabama before. He's just got there and he blunders into the heel locker room by mistake. And Schultz obviously has to know who he is because look at the size of him. You couldn't mistake him for anybody else. Probably cussed him like a redheaded stepchild for being in the wrong fucking locker room. Get the fuck out of here, you fucking idiot. Kayfabe. It's what you would say that to one of the boys who was obviously doing something contrary to that in public. Kayfabe, idiot. So I can see that happening, but I don't think he was so clueless at that point. He just blundered in the wrong door.
He wanted to beat my ass. And there were a bunch of other wrestlers there. Roy Wayne Ferris, the Honky Tonk Man, and some others who could have backed him up.
He makes Wayne sound like a fucking serial killer with people in his goddamn crawl space when he reads out his real legal name. And then there was Roy Wayne Ferris, who was convicted of.
But I was so big, they didn't really jump. So I just walked across the arena floor to the good guys' dressing room and met all the guys I was supposed to be with. But that was my introduction to Dr. D. Pretty soon, we would raise some hell together and become good friends. And we would stay that way for a long time. And after that, he would end up hating my guts and calling me a steroid abuser. But at the time, all I knew about him was that he had given me a hard time for walking in to the wrong dressing room. But let's get to the Memphis part here. This is page 43 of the Hulk Hogan autobiography. I wasn't exclusive to Louis Tillett, so I wrestled for a couple of other outfits in between runs in the Pensacola, Alabama territory. One of them was the partnership of Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett, which operated out of Memphis, Tennessee. Jerry Lawler was like a god in Memphis. At times, he was as popular as Elvis. He even ran for mayor as a joke. He didn't lift a finger to promote
It wasn't a fucking joke.
He didn't lift a finger to promote his campaign, and he came in third in a 15-candidate race.
Oh, he gave quite a few people a finger trying to win.
It was in Tennessee that I became known as Terry the Hulk Boulder and won my first heavyweight championship belt. I wasn't Hulk Hogan quite yet, but I was getting there. It was also in Tennessee that I started using a boot to the face and a leg drop as a finish. Nobody else was using a leg drop at the time, so it set me a little apart from the other guys.
Okay, hold on one second. People in this territory had been watching Plowboy Frazier drop the fucking leg for goddamn 15 years at that point. Here's the thing, Hogan did start. I don't remember the boot to the face yet. It definitely didn't always preface the leg drop, but when he started doing the leg drop here, I can testify it was the most air he ever got. Because the Memphis rings had some give to him because it was a bumping territory, and he could get a little spring and he would get air, and it looked fucking good for a guy that size. That was one of his, most accomplished moves. But when he got to the rings that Vern and then Vince had, that air significantly fucking declined.
One night in Memphis, I saw Jerry Lawler put a pile driver on a comedian named Andy Kaufman,
What the fuck?
who had gotten involved in wrestling. Then Lawler and Andy Kaufman showed up on the David Letterman show. Lawler slapped Kaufman, and Kaufman threw coffee in Lawler's face. And all of a sudden, Andy Kaufman began showing up on wrestling cards on a constant basis. I didn't
hold on here 1 second. By the way, the Hulk worked Memphis in 1979, and Lawler pile drove Kaufman on May 5th, 1982. Just for perspective.
Now, he did come in one time as a heel managed by Jimmy Hart against Lawler. Was that 81?
February 1981. I was there, and I'm in the fucking at ringside in the video taking pictures.
Okay, well, he puts himself here in Memphis when this happened. I don't understand why they let a guy like Andy Kaufman get into the ring to wrestle, especially after I had worked so hard to pay my dues. But I was young and green in those days. I thought wrestling was about having a good match, getting a six-pack of beer, and picking up a girl. It didn't occur to me that we were trying to draw money. I remember a time at the old Chicago Amphitheater.
Now, actually, during the period of time that Hulk was in Memphis, that first run, I could agree with that. It didn't appear that he knew that the object was to draw money.
I remember a time in the old Chicago Amphitheater when I was working for Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett, when I happened to walk in on a meeting in the dressing room. Lawler was there, Jarrett was there, and Andy Kaufman was there.
Oh, good Lord.
It was like walking into a Pentagon meeting. I knew I needed to back up. I knew I needed to back right up.
Because all three of these personalities are so intimidating.
Because I wasn't welcome. Later on, I passed Andy Kaufman in the hallway. I didn't know him, but I didn't think it would hurt to be friendly, so I said hello to him.
Why would he think that? Why would that even pass some kind of editing process if this is indeed a book instead of like Mario Galinto's self-published thing that his fucking wife wrote?
Well, let me stop here and ask you. So because you were still around, when Lawler and Jarrett ran all those shows at the Chicago Amphitheater, was there typically a room that they held their secret meetings with Andy Kaufman in?
No. Well, and here's the thing, Jarrett and Lawler never ran the Chicago International Amphitheater. Lawler has worked there. It was long past a point where Hogan would have worked for Vern and been at the Chicago Amphitheater, where Lawler and Jarrett co-promoted Super Clash. That was in 1987. Hogan had other fish to fry at that point. Andy Kaufman died in 1983. Hogan, no, none of these people coexisted on a wrestling show in Chicago or anywhere else. Kaufman didn't die in 1983. I'm sorry, it was 84, right?
The beginning of 84, I believe, yeah.
But the point is, no, Hulk Hogan, I'm sure Andy Kaufman and Hulk Hogan had met at some point. And we know Lawler and Kaufman had met. We know Lawler and Hulk have met, but they weren't all three in the same place the same fucking time ever. Especially with Jerry Jarrett added to the mix.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Did Jerry Jarrett, to the best of your memory, ever fly up for one of the Chicago shows in 83?
Maybe at Super Clash, maybe, thinking, well, if I'm here, Vern will have to give me some money, and he didn't. but no, this is all, and again, the timeline don't work. The Hulk came into Tennessee, and God damn it, was it? Yes, it was early '79. They did the video that's out there on YouTube, but you've seen it with Michael St. John doing the voiceover, and they shot him from feet to head, right on the with the lighting of the bodybuilding. It's the Hulk, and he worked as Lawler's tag team partner for a few weeks. I think against Ron Bass and Pete Austin that he worked with him and his brother Eddie Boulder, who came at but point Terry Boulder was here for a few weeks. He did a team thing with Lawler against the Mongolian Stomper and somebody. And then he was out for several weeks, which I believe was they sent him to Mobile, one of the runs there. And then he came back, and that was, he introduced his brother. And that was the summer of '79, where it was Terry and Eddie Boulder, who later would become Dizzy Hogan, Ed Leslie, Brutus Beefcake. And they had a program with Ron Bass and Pete Austin, who my old partner Danny Davis was managing, Sergeant Danny Davis. And they tried to push Hulk because of his look and his size, and putting him in a main event with as tag team partners with Lawler for a couple weeks against the Stomper, etc. That was fine. But then that night in Memphis, and that was the WFIA convention, they tried to put Terry and Eddie Boulder against Ron Bass and Pete Austin in the main event after they'd seen Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee versus Michael Hayes and Terry Gordy, the Freebirds, and Jackie and Roughhouse Fargo against Wayne Ferris and Larry Latham, the Blonde Bombers, and Danny Davis in a 3-on-2 handicap match where they tore the whole building up. And that was what the people, there was like 8,000 or 9,000 people or whatever. That was what they came to see. And then here goes the main event with the Hogan brothers out there, and it was crickets. They were so green. The people were used to action and matches and people talk and, you know, what the fuck, blah, blah, blah. It's all this wild shit. And then these green muscle guys, it didn't translate. And they had a stinky run for maybe another 3 months or whatever. And poof, they were gone.
And Hogan couldn't talk yet either.
He was struggling because you've there again on YouTube. I was in the TV studio when one of those interviews that's on YouTube was cut, and he was saying daddy, but he was like, and I'm going to tell you this, daddy, and brother. And he was trying, he knew what he wanted to do, but it wasn't coming out yet because he did his first year in the business. They did not get over because of the competition on the roster from all these other guys that knew exactly what the fans wanted to see. And they were just green and they couldn't fucking talk.
Well, let me finish his thoughts on Andy Kaufman. Of course, he passed him in the hallway. His eyes opened real wide, and he looked at me like he was scared to death. Like he thought I was going to kill him on the spot. He was out of his element, I guess. And he didn't know what to expect.
That was actually Andy Kaufman's normal facial expression.
I never really liked his act. That poo-poo pee-pee stuff he dialed up. The weird alien mouse voice. It was out there. It never did anything for me.
Is Hogan the only person in the world that didn't love Andy fucking Kaufman?
If you ask me, it was just boring.
Oh, good Lord.
That poo-poo pee-pee stuff he did. The alien
pee-pee.
mouse voice. I mean, he played Mighty Mouse. That was one of his skits.
Or, so, well, you can tell that apparently Hogan has spent a lot of time boning up on pop culture. He ought to listen to this show. See, we had the George M. Cohan reference earlier, but now we're going to do the Seven Little Foys in a minute.
Well, that's, again, from the Hulk Hogan book.
Oh, the poo-poo pee-pee.
Some of the chapters here: A Rock and a Hard Place, The Giant, Kayfabe, Steroids, Money, Music, Money, and Matsuda. So obviously there's maybe more to mine here in the future. The Deodorant King. When I was wrestling in New York, I met a guy named Mike Sharp, who was a second-generation wrestler and the biggest hygiene freak I had ever met. Mike Sharp was usually a preliminary wrestler, so he would often be in the first match of the evening. But there were times where he would get locked in the building after everyone went home because he was still in the shower washing off.
Okay, I hate to say it, but this is a spot where Hulk Hogan is not telling a lie.
Usually,
Mike Sharp. Well, go ahead.
usually a guy would put a right guard deodorant stick under his armpit and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, done. Mike Sharp would carry on a 20-minute conversation and swab his arm with the stick the whole time. He would use up the whole damn stick. And then he would start on the other armpit. In fact, if you looked in his bag, he had 30 or 40 deodorant sticks sitting in there. Then, after he was all done using the sticks, he would go back and take another shower. And he would do the same thing over and over again until they kicked him out of the building. It went on every night. The guy was a total wacko for hygiene. By the way, that's an entire chapter. That's chapter 12, the Deodorant King.
Well, and it degenerated into just a bit of exaggeration, but not that much. It was Mike Sharp was, and I only peripherally knew him because he was still working when I first started with the WWF. He was still working, especially like the TVs in the Northeast, whatever. But he was noted in the industry. It wasn't just with he, I guess, had some kind of OCD, but he was a physical fitness guy too. He was very, serious with that. And he would get to the building like hours before everybody did so he could go out and run the bleachers. You just see him running up and down the stairs in the building, up and down and up and down and up and down. And then he'd take a shower. And then, he might then have to go to the meeting with the finish or what he was going to do, talk to his opponent or whatever. Okay. And then if he had time before the doors open, he'd go run some and then he'd take a shower. And then after his match, he had his after-match routine, and it was an involved thing. And it on at least one occasion, which gave rise to, it used to happen all the time, but it may have happened more than once. His after-match shower, and bear in mind, he wasn't on last. He was on in the middle of the show, but I think he did some more fucking calisthenics after his match in the locker room. And then he would take a shower, and one night the shower went so long that everybody left, and they closed the building, locked him in the fucking building. Because nobody knew he was still back there in the shower in the bowels of the building. And that was kind of the thing that he was known for. And very conscientious about his work. I mean, but I don't know if Mike Sharp is still around, and I've certainly
he passed. He passed a few years back.
All right. Well, and I wasn't trying to start a feud with him or anything, but there had to be something going on. But he was not a crazy person. He was a well-meaning, earnest, kind of straight type of person that I had experience with. Like, oh, yes, no, yeah, whatever the fuck. Not like some crazy person, but he was.
Here's my impression of Mike Sharp walking down the hallway after realizing he's locked in the building. Ah! Ah! He used to just growl in his matches. That's what made him stand out. I loved it. I saw him doing it at the Manhattan Center. He got the whole building going.
He looks a lot like, I guess maybe even some of the fans who saw him on WWF TV don't know his father and his uncle, the Sharp brothers, Mike and Ben Sharp, Mike Sharp Sr., they were a giant, big name attraction tag team in the 1950s, and they were on that first tour in Japan with Ricky Dozan, where the Sharp brothers in Japan, because they were like 6'5" or 6 apiece and 260 pounds or whatever. That was giant for the time. So they were the first major Americans names wrestling in Japan, and they were a noted tag team. And he looked a lot like him, and he had that old-fashioned 50s way of body language, way of carrying himself and drawing back at the fans and all that stuff.
It was great.
But
He pulled it off. He made it work.
but he was locked in at least one building for bathing too long.
I just found a flyer the other day for his wrestling school down in, I think, Brick, New Jersey. And a lot of the Jersey indie guys of the 90s came out of there. Devin Storm, Donnie B, I think maybe Mike Moraldo, Inferno Kid, maybe. I don't know. A lot of guys from New Jersey came through. Maybe not Inferno Kid, but a lot of the other guys. I don't know.
Well, thank you for that clear and concise.
I'm trying to think of a couple. Maybe Rick Ratchet, but I don't know if any wrestling school would want to take
You've been keeping long hours with all this business we've been trying to conduct here lately.
More to be announced. More to be announced. But